I guess we can wait for the other two guests, but in the while we can get started. So I would like to introduce this panel. My name is Giovanni. I am the video host at Cointelegraph, and I'm very excited about moderating this panel about NFTs and museums, and specifically why NFTs, why museums aren't cashing in on NFTs, at least yet. So with us, we have a bunch of very interesting and qualified guests to talk about it. Now I'm going to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. But first, I would like to address our audience and explain a little bit how this app works. So during the conversation, for the audience, you can use that icon, that smile icon on the bottom, to express your reactions to the talk. So please feel free to use that if you have any emotions to express regarding what is being said. Also, feel free to check out each other's profile by clicking on the pictures on the bottom of the people in the audience, so you can connect with each other, and you can also fill in your profile if you haven't done it already. So we are going to invite people to speak, but just at the end of the conversation. So we're going to have 15 minutes for all the questions that you have at the end of the panel. And so I will allow you to get into the stage and ask questions to our guests. So I think we can get started. So maybe George, you want to go first. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. My name is George Back. I'm based in Switzerland. I've been in the art world for the past 20 years. Worked in different galleries, had my own gallery. In the last 5 years, I actually dived into the blockchain and art intersection. And I did curate some exhibitions, and also worked in the blockchain industry, where we are working on tokenization projects. Currently, I'm working for TokenGate, one of the leading companies for tokenization in Switzerland.
All right, that sounds exciting. And now, Nick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks. And hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? That's coming through?
It's not very clear. Maybe you can, do you have your headphones on?
Here we go. How's that? Is that a bit better?
That's a bit better, yes.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Sorry about that. Hi, my name's Nick Abrahams, and I'm the global leader of the digital transformation practice at Norton Rose Fulbright. We're a global law firm and consultancy, and so my work is predominantly helping large organisations, many of them more traditional organisations, come to terms with particularly what the opportunities are in Web3. So tokenisation is a big part of it, as is sort of the move to the Metaverse, and NFTs have been an important aspect of that work as well. And I've had the opportunity to do some quite significant work with one of the world's leading NFT providers. So, delighted to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you both here. So I guess that we can get started with some questions. By the way, if you can you keep your video on, or you would prefer to keep them off? Just because usually it's better for interactions with the audience to have the video on. So I don't know if that's great. Also, I can see when you are talking, maybe you are muted and you don't realize it. Okay, so let's start with the conversation. So here we are trying to figure out why museums, kind of legacy art institutions, haven't embraced NFTs yet. So I would like to start the discussion with a very basic question. So why should museums embrace NFTs in the first place? Why do museums need NFTs? Maybe George, you wanna go first, since you are in the art industry already.
Well, I think it's not just NFTs. I would say blockchain technology in general would be interesting for museums. For example, a token model for you could create like a social token where people could participate in a DAO and also help museums with financially, but also participate in certain decisions. At the moment, I feel that most museums are basically only showing art from the 20 most important or biggest galleries in the world. So like smaller shows or smaller projects, they don't even have a chance to be shown in the museum, but maybe the public interest would be to see something else, and why not giving people the chance to participate in a DAO and buy tokens and have a vote for something that they want to see in a museum. This is just an idea that came up in my mind lately. But of course, NFTs is another thing. You can certainly integrate NFTs, not just in your own collection. Museums should buy NFTs, but also, you could sell NFTs just as you are selling some editions or posters or books in the museum shop.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Those are two interesting applications. So we're gonna dive further into them in a bit. I just wanna get Nick's view on this question. So what comes to your mind when I ask why should museum embrace NFTs?
Yeah, I need to be, I think, careful around this particular topic because I think with blockchain technology, those of us that are enthusiastic about it have been accused of, when you've got a hammer, everything you see is a nail. And by that, what I mean is that people see blockchain as a solution in search of a problem and not necessarily important or critical in and of itself. So I always tend to be a little reticent to say, everyone should embrace blockchain because it's fantastic. It has some unbelievably great use cases, and maybe we can go into a few of those separately later on. But I think, whether a museum embraces blockchain or not, it's not necessarily, from my point of view, that they should. I think it's a matter of finding how the museum can benefit from the specific technology that blockchain or NFT provides. And so it's interesting. So the British Museum just announced that it's going to be selling some NFTs of the Japanese artist Hokusai, which is the tsunami wave, which I think we're all very familiar with. So it'd be interesting to see how that sells as an NFT. And I believe that NFTs aren't about art necessarily. I know that'll sound terrible to people sort of in the art world, but I think if you look at it, a lot of, particularly the big prices that have been paid for NFTs, really comes out of the community, as in those particular artists have a very big following in the cyber community, and so that's why they're purchased, not necessarily and there's a lot of sort of marketing and there's sort of good following on Twitter and other areas and other platforms that causes the artist to sell well. It's not necessarily 100% about the art, I would say, in compared to, I guess, more traditional art. And then just finally on that topic, the Institute of Contemporary Art in Miami is exhibiting a CryptoPunk NFT, and that's the first NFT that's being put on display in a large museum of art. So I think that's an interesting approach too, which is looking at it from the other way, which is, museums could certainly be taking their existing collections and be making NFTs, but should museums actually be embracing NFTs and that are born digital and be displaying those in a more traditional environment?
Yeah, actually, you mentioned a very interesting point, which is the fact that NFTs are about the community. So we see completely new communities building around digital artists, and as George was saying, the NFTs allow a new type of interactions with the creative process of an artist, and can allow a more direct interaction between those who experience art and those who create, but in the case of the museum, also those who exhibit art. So that's for sure a fascinating side of the story to explore. But the main topic of today was exploring basically how the museums can take a profit out of NFTs. So why would they benefit from a financial perspective by using NFTs? So maybe George, would you give us your perspective on this specific side of the question?
Sure. I think there's different ways where you can monetize, with NFTs. You can, for example, as I just mentioned, you can have NFTs in the museum shop where people just can buy something with a wallet. But you could also sell tickets. Tickets as NFTs, or you could sell annual memberships as NFTs, or the Patrons Club could receive an NFT for paying $1,000 a year or something. I think there's very different ways how you could use this technology to make it more interesting for people to support an institution and also have the feeling that they get something for it.
Yeah, actually, what you said remind me of an initiative that was made by the State Hermitage in Russia, in St. Petersburg. They sold a few of their masterpieces, like Leonardo da Vinci, Van Gogh, and other very renowned artists. They sold those pieces in the form of NFTs, and those NFTs were signed by the director of the Hermitage himself. So they were not like exactly the copy itself of the original, but they were more like of a souvenir sort of thing that clearly played on the hype around NFTs, and they basically sold those NFTs that were replicas signed by the director of the Hermitage. There were like four or five of them. They were sold for a total of almost around $400,000. So I'm not sure if that can be considered to be art. I guess it's more like, as you said, another way to use NFTs, not exactly as pieces of art, but it was still an interesting way to interact with this technology. But what do you think, George, then are the obstacles? Because that was an example, the one of the Hermitage, but it was more of an exception. So most museums are still not so much involved in the space. So why do you think museums haven't made big steps in the NFT space yet?
Well, I think the decision-making process in museums is usually very slow. That's one thing. The other thing is you need to have you need to be set up technically. So you might have to invest a little bit of money first before you can cash in, and then you also have to have a strategy. I mean, do you want to sell NFTs of your own collection? How do you want to present the collection? Is it going to be an edition? Is it going to be a unique NFT that you're buying? So some museums might not, they don't know whether they want to make the step, whether they want to invest some money first. Maybe some of them are just waiting for other museums to try it out first. So I think there's probably once a few museums will step into the space, I think that's gonna encourage other ones also to do the same, and they will also see some successful NFT models. I think it's just probably that nobody wanted to make the first step, but currently I see quite a few museums which are stepping into the NFT space.
Mm-hmm. Nick, what do you think about George's observations?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think George is absolutely on the money there. I think there's a couple of key issues when thinking about museums. Firstly, they all need money. Museums, for the most part, struggle financially, and so there's definitely a need there. How can they monetize their asset or their offering better? And so it seems like NFTs could create a path to that. I think that the next thing that we know about museums is that they have usually some sort of foundation type structure and a board, and often that board is very risk averse, and usually that board is people who are probably coming from more conventional careers and probably unlikely to be digital natives necessarily. So I think there's a sense of there's risk aversion because of the governance structure, and I think George hit upon a really important issue, which is you have to be set up to do this stuff, and museums aren't technically, for the most part, sort of necessarily
Cut out a little bit.
Of technology. Museums aren't at the forefront of technology for the most part, and so can you hear me better now?
Yeah. Now it's fine.
Okay, great. So what I've seen is that what we need is another layer of solution providers who actually go to the museums with the proposition around, you've got a big collection. We'd like to make NFTs of, these particular pieces, or as George said, I think the idea of ticketing via NFT, I think we'll see that as very common in the future, not just to museums, but we've seen it with a lot of sporting events now, commemorative tickets being issued by NFTs, and also VIP NFTs, which allow some sort of premium access to particular areas and so forth. So I think ticketing is a very good area to think about, but I don't think it's going to necessarily come from the museums themselves. I think we need that entrepreneurial layer of solution providers who say, we're going to be in the game of helping museums with NFTs and going and pitching to museums these particular ideas. And that, of course, will come once, as George has said, we see a number of successful business models around museums actually making some money out of the NFT approach. But I think the critical thing to always remember is that it's about trying to figure out, I think of NFTs that have value as really coming from, they have one of four particular drivers. So one is that there's a community around them. So you look at Dapper Labs and NBA's Top Shots, the basketball NFT drop, which has been enormously expensive, enormously successful. So several hundreds of millions of dollars of NFTs traded there. So I think the same with the Bored Ape, real community around that, and there's VIP aspects to owning those. You've then got utility. So I think the more that an NFT has some form of utility, that's why ticketing is a good one. That's why VIP access or VIP value added opportunities as a result of having the NFT is good. And Penfolds, which is a very big wine brand, they have just recently released a number of 300 premium bottles of wine as NFTs. And the reason for that is that wine is very difficult to gift to people. It's very hard to give a gift of wine. You have to, get the bottle and send it on. And with premium wine, if you're paying $400 or $500 for a bottle of wine, things like temperature and so forth are critical. And so you don't want to be sending that wine around the world or even, next door. So what they've done is they've worked with an NFT provider called Block Bar. And so the wine is produced by Penfolds. It stays in Block Bar's wine facility. And then the NFT in relation to the wine is issued, and that NFT can then be traded, but it also can be gifted. And the gifting market is actually very significant. It's the number one market for premium wine. So it's opened up a bigger market for them in the gifting space. So I think it's important that it has utility. Then there's flex. So the idea of, a digital flex. So owning a Bored Ape obviously gives someone, a level of digital flex when they're putting that up as their profile pic and so forth. I'm not sure how long digital flex lasts for or how big a driver that will be in the long term, but it's certainly been a driver. And then the final one, which is interesting for me, is twinning. And so that's where you're getting a digital version of what you have bought in the real world. And so Selfridges, the department store, has just announced a drop of NFTs for a Paco Rabanne collection. And so when you buy the actual dress, you also get an NFT of that. So I think we will see a lot more twinning, and so certain automotive manufacturers are looking at twinning. So you buy the car and you get also a digital twin of it. We know they've been doing that in engineering worlds for a while, but I think that's another interesting area. If we could apply, each of those to museums and see how they could benefit based on the assets that they've currently got.
Yeah, I mean, those are all very interesting applications of NFT technology. I would like to go deeper into them a bit later, but first, I was interested in hearing your opinion about this aspect of museums that tend to be quite conservative at times. As you said, there are like boards that might be a bit skeptical about crypto, and in general, museums are not always very future oriented in terms of technologies. But there is also the aspect of the legal issues around cryptocurrency. So as we know, crypto is not regulated in the same way everywhere in the world. There are jurisdictions more or less welcoming cryptocurrencies and NFTs in particular, NFTs as part of cryptocurrency. For example, I can bring again the example of the Hermitage, which is one of the biggest museums in the world. It's based in Russia, and in Russia, the cryptocurrency space is still in a kind of a gray zone because the central bank is not very friendly toward cryptocurrency, and so the museum was in a difficult position because he wanted to sell these NFTs, NFT versions of its masterpieces, but in Russia it's illegal to sell crypto for services, for purchase, or using it to purchase things. So basically, there was a very complicated legal process with which they managed to sell those NFTs, but they had to go. They had to rely on a number of different intermediators in other countries in order to do that. So, how do you see the regulatory hurdles here? Do you see it as a problem for museums embracing NFTs, Nick?
Oh yes, I think every time I work with a client in relation to NFTs or anything that touches on the crypto sphere, regulation is always the number one concern. And as you say, some countries are better, or there's more clarity around the regulation, and that can be actually more difficult because the regulation actually prohibits a lot of things. George mentioned the idea of a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization, and so we're seeing sort of more of those. They are a very complex legal beast and hard for more traditional thinkers, and perhaps certainly if you're in the risk averse camp, it can be very difficult to get your head around how those things operate. But I think we're starting to see a wave of regulatory change where, and I don't know that it's necessarily going to make things easier. I think the regulation will require organisations to perhaps jump through more hoops in order to produce the sort of solutions that they want. But what it will mean is once it gets regulated, then more risk-averse players, such as we mentioned, the boards of museums, can start to get a bit more comfortable about that. I mean, I think if you look at NFTs in particular, people are getting more comfortable with the regulatory aspects of that, particularly where there's no requirement to pay. You look at, there's been a lot of the fashion houses have dropped NFTs and so forth. So I think that's starting to become more well accepted. I guess so I think the regulatory issues are a challenge, but once you actually drop into it, you can get over those. I think the other issue is it's actually very complex to receipt cryptocurrency as an organization. So when you're actually a normal organization, that's fine. You're receiving fiat currency, that's no problems. You're used to doing that. Once you have to start receiving cryptocurrency, and particularly if you have to hold it on your balance sheet, that becomes a whole nother world of accounting and tax issues. And whilst these are very, these sound like boring issues, these are at the heart of every organization. And when you've got an organization that is structured to deal with its finance and tax issues in a certain way, it takes quite a lot of work to retool that and enable people to receive cryptocurrency and indeed hold cryptocurrency. And you want to be careful if you're the one promoting the crypto project. If something goes bad, and obviously we've seen the last couple of months, Bitcoin and a number of the other currencies have gone down, and so people are looking at places that have adopted cryptocurrency like El Salvador and saying, oh, it's a terrible idea and so forth. So there's enormous volatility in the crypto space. So I think your point is well made that for traditionally quite risk-averse organizations, it can be challenging for them to be in a position where they're actually selling things and receiving cryptocurrency in exchange.
Yeah, and I want to get also George's perspective on this one. I know that he's based in Switzerland, which is, I think, is known to be quite of a friendly jurisdiction towards crypto. So maybe George can give us his perspective on this regulatory side of the problem. Oh, I think that we lost George for a second. Yes, seems to have some connection problems. I will take this chance to remind our audience to please don't forget to use the reactions. So I know that it's a bit strange expressing reactions using like a menu like this, but I think this is at the core of this format for doing panels. Oh, okay. We got George back. So, George, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I hope you can hear me as well.
Yeah, now we can hear you loud and clear. So, we were saying you were about to tell us about your view on the regulatory side of the issue.
Well, I'm not sure whether I'm competent enough to talk about the regulatory issues. Certainly, we have a new law in Switzerland which regulates quite a few things on distributed ledger. We don't have a specific law or regulations on NFTs. I think one of the major issues is certainly the tax issue. How do you like, for example, in Germany, you have to hold your cryptocurrencies for at least a year. Otherwise, they look at you as a trader, a commercial dealer, and you have to pay commercial taxes. And I think we just don't have enough, experience yet that, especially museums, where we can say that, where the problems are. I think most museums have other issues. They are probably afraid of security, but also when it comes to collecting NFTs, they are afraid of how do you make sure that you're not being over spammed with all kinds of artworks in your wallet once people know your public address, and how do you structure your collection, your NFT collection. There's not so many really good applications where you can basically have an overview of your collection.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, of course, lending an NFT to an exhibition. You have to lend the actual NFT, or is it just like a JPEG of the artwork, etc. I think there's quite a few questions, unsolved questions, where museums are quite unsecure about.
Yeah, actually, it's true. Like the essence itself of NFT is providing the original, right? So having a unique version of a specific digital work of art. So what would the museum exhibit? Would it exhibit like a copy of the just JPEG, or the what in what format would be the audience be able to experience the NFT without making the NFT losing the essence, its very essence. But I would like to ask you if you know any examples of museums successfully adopting NFTs in your country. So where you live in Switzerland, do you have any good examples?
Well, in Switzerland, not yet. I mean, I'm on the advisory board of the House of Electronic Arts, and that's certainly one of the big questions now, how to collect NFTs. I know that in Austria there is a museum, the Francisco Carolinum, which is probably one of the first museums that started to collect NFTs, but also exhibit NFTs. They also have a space in the Metaverse, so they are quite avant-garde in this sense. I think in Switzerland it's probably we will see some cases this year.
Mm-hmm. And what about Australia? Nick, do you have any good examples of museums embracing NFTs where you are based?
No, we haven't seen anything yet. And as I said, I think the British Museum and the Miami Institute of Contemporary Art were the only ones that I've come across. But I think George's point about museums with spaces in the Metaverse, that may be a lead in to the NFT world as well, because I think if we put our minds back to Second Life, I don't know if people remember that virtual world, which was popular 7 or 8, 10 years ago. We certainly saw some museums spending money to build their spaces in Second Life, and I sense that we can't be too far away from that, right now. So you've got, places like Barbados that are, building embassies in Second Life. Seoul in Korea is building a customer service center, in the Metaverse. They're both building those in the Metaverse. I think there's a lot of organization, Nike and so forth, building their sections of the Metaverse, and Facebook with 10,000 developers building out their part of the Metaverse. I imagine there must be a desire to get these particular museums to come and join in the Metaverse. So I think, once again, I think that it may well be more of a pull aspect to museums coming into the Metaverse, where organizations and entrepreneurs come up with good use cases and then are able to convince the museum that they should come and join the Metaverse or drop NFTs and so forth. So I think it's up to skilled and risk-taking entrepreneurs to probably drive this. I think we'll see more coming that way than we will necessarily coming specifically from the museum boards themselves.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Now I would like to actually introduce a more controversial issue, which is more related to the spirit of the NFT space and crypto in general. So NFTs, the NFT community is a community of largely new artists, new emerging artists that, thanks to NFTs, are getting exposure, and they basically it's a new way to interact with your audience. It's a new way to, at least that's what people say, that it's a way to democratize the world of art, which has been for years sort of monopolized by large entities like art galleries, like auction houses, museums. NFTs have a little bit of that sense of bypassing all these intermediaries and creating a more direct connection between the artists and the audience. So here comes the question. So the museums are represented as centralized legacy art institutions that NFTs want to kind of bypass. So I ask you, why do museums need NFTs? But now I would ask you, why do NFTs need museums? Maybe George can go for that one.
Well, I think NFTs need a new format of a museum. I mean, since they're in most cases natively digital art, I think you have to show them in a in a digital museum, like in a Metaverse space on Decentraland or Crypto Voxels, where you display them in the way you should look at the NFTs. Certainly, there are also some digital artworks which are, like larger installations, where the NFT might just be the certification of ownership of that artwork. But I think, now we are entering in the age of the Metaverse, so I think museums really have to think about how they expand their space and how they want to display NFTs. And I mean, certainly there's also, private museums. I know some private collectors who have built the museums in some of the metaverses. And I think that's probably the right way. You can obviously also show NFTs on screens in an art exhibition or in an art collection, like the ICA in Miami, for example. But I think, why not expanding your space, and have a digital space for your NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of guess that perhaps museums, like large, famous, well-known institutions, can provide an additional platform for these new emerging digital artists to gain exposure even more, maybe among the legacy art audience. So trying to kind of connect these two worlds, the legacy world of art and the crypto related art world. But what I would like to know also what Nick thinks about these controversies, if you can call it like that.
Yeah, there is a little controversy about this, I think. So I think art plays a role in reflecting society and so forth, and so art museums should be seeing how is it that they can in some way explain and bring this sort of crypto phenomenon to non sort of crypto enthusiasts, if you like. So there's right at the moment it's a very split audience. There's basically those folks who are paying a lot of money for digital art pieces as NFTs, and then there's the rest of the world who cannot understand how someone could pay so much money for something that's digital, for something that's not in the real world. And that there's a lot to explaining that, and as I said previously, I don't think that these huge numbers that are getting paid for these digital art pieces are necessarily driven by the art itself, if you like. There's the community around it, there's the flex around it, there's the potential utility. So I think, how is it that art museums can actually explain this to the community who doesn't really understand how this money could be paid or how any of this artwork could be worth such things. So I think there's a wonderful opportunity there to be that museum who says, you know, we're going to take this on and try to bring this art so that people can see, obviously, you know, the great part about this digital art, but also why this is a phenomena in the way that it is.
Mm. Yeah. So going back to the core issue, which was, I mean, the main issue of the conversation is the way museums can actually make NFTs as a new revenue stream. So in my experience, the only direct experience I had is the one with the Hermitage in Russia. The museum managed to sell those copies of its own original works of art for that certain amount of money. And then they made an exhibition in the Metaverse, as you were mentioning, that is also a way to explore the future way museums will be. So, as you said, the museums will need to transition into the digital world as the rest of the world is slowly moving in that direction. But on that side, the exhibition was purely was not generating any profit to the museum because it was free. You could access it for free. So I guess the only revenue stream in that model was the sale of those copies of work of art. So Nick, I think that I didn't get what would be, according to you, the main ways to monetize the NFTs for museums. Do you have any more additional ideas?
No, I don't really have any additional ideas. I think the simplest way into this, I think, is through ticketing. I think that is a very powerful medium, and giving some sort of VIP access to NFT ticket holders. We know that museums produce tickets. Anyway, if you can give some degree of privilege or prestige, that it gets into that sort of digital flex type argument. But if the NFT ticket attracts some level of better access, you mentioned the idea of the director of the Hermitage actually signing the NFT works, something that that's what you've got to find. It can't just be an NFT copy of an existing work. So I think it's important to try to find that what is the special thing, special privilege that you would get by buying that NFT ticket, or what is it about? If it's going to be about NFTs of the existing collection, I just wonder how do you create value around that? And so, as I said at the start, these aren't selling because of the art itself. They're selling because of the communities around the artist largely. So people are interested in the artists. So is there a way that the museums can work with the existing digital artists and create some form of mashup or something that they then release the NFT? So you actually, using your existing collection, you work with another digital artist to create something new. And just on that, we just need to be careful too, because people, I think, are a little confused around the actual NFT and what the NFT gives you. And we just need to always remember that the NFT doesn't give any rights of ownership in the underlying work. So the underlying work of the painting, would be, protected by some form of intellectual property law, copyright or otherwise. But the NFT does not give you a right to go and do something with that particular piece of art. And so there's a very interesting example of the book June, which is a science fiction, quite a famous science fiction book, just came out as another movie. And a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization, just paid $2.5 million for a particular edition of this book in hard copy. And it appears that they bought it in the mistaken belief that in some way gave them the right to make a movie based on that book. And so they seem to have gotten that quite wrong, in that all they bought was the physical book itself, and the actual rights to make some sort of adaptation of that, whether it's a movie or something else, is another form of right that they would have had to buy, which was certainly worth a lot more than $2 million. So the last that they effectively paid $2.5 million for a book that last sold for like $30,000 or something like that. So I think people need to be conscious of that. So yeah, they're my thoughts.
Yeah, of course. Even in the case of the Hermitage, the digital copies that were sold, like the five copies were sold for around $500,000, which doesn't reflect nearly the real value of the underlying real art piece, which would be worth much more than that. So of course, everyone needs to keep in mind that the NFT is not the same as buying the underlying asset associated with it. But first, now I would like to introduce our audience, to give our audience the opportunity to ask questions. So I see that we have one guest that would like to interact with the panelists. So now I will give him the opportunity to speak.
Yes, hello there. Thank you for insightful information. I have a question to Nick, since you're a legal expert. I think, in my opinion, museums are not adopting the NFT concept purely because of the sale of the digital shadow of works of art. It kind of entails a myriad of legal complexity, whether it's relating to intellectual property rights, whether it's a copyright situation, etc. I think you would remember that back in March, a kind of a self-proclaimed art and technology experts were offering a collection of NFTs without permission of the museums that were holding the copyrights. I think they're called Global something museum, art museum. So what's your opinion on what are the key legal challenges that will prevent museums mainstream adoption of NFTs? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think, first and foremost, the key challenge will be understanding how it is that you have all of the relevant rights to make the NFT available. So that's it shouldn't be a major concern for most museums. If you own the underlying work, then that gives you at law the ability to make copies of that. And so what you're doing with an NFT is you're making a copy of the copyright, and then you are attaching, so you're making it available in a particular medium, as in a digital medium, and you are attaching certain rules to it, the smart contract that underlies the actual NFT artwork. So I think I think it should be relatively straightforward for the museums. They, for the most part, they own, obviously, if the stuff's on, if it's have been borrowed from other collections, and they can't do anything about that. There'll be a lot of issues. If you've got multiple, lenders who are lending things to the collection, you would need to get them comfortable with the idea. But if the museum owns the underlying work outright, then it's a relatively simple proposition to make that available as an NFT. And then via the smart contract, you can then limit, what can be done with that NFT, or indeed, one of the great benefits, of course, with NFTs is that you can secure a future revenue stream where if that NFT is on traded, then the museum could get a percentage of what it is sold for. So some good opportunities there. I just noticed the time. I'll have to jump off in about a minute. I'm sorry. It's quite early here in Sydney, and I've oddly got another seminar on NFTs. This is about to go on in Saudi Arabia, of all places. So I could probably only stay for another minute or so, but happy to answer something more if that would be helpful.
Excuse me, if I may ask Giovanni, do you mind if I bring Dr. Valianti? She's an NFT and museum expert. She's sitting currently in the audience. I would love to hear her thoughts on the presentation.
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Valianti, would you like to come up? Just press on the stage button.
And I'm sorry, I might just have to jump out. I would love to hear what Fortini has to say, but I should jump. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of the session. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick, for being with us.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yes, sir. Dr. Valianti, you need to unmute yourself on the panel below.
Hi, everyone. I'm calling in from London. I can stay for about 5 minutes. But anyway, interesting conversation. Thank you for that. And Sean, thank you for inviting me. I've spent about about a year now researching museum NFTs. So I have done a lot of research and all that. If you look up my LinkedIn, you will find I led a journal article, which it's 12,000 word long, and it kind of examines some of the things that were touched upon today, like copyright, copyright and NFTs, the museum challenges for embracing NFTs, and all sorts. Anyway, it was very interesting, and I think the key topics were kind of covered, in my opinion, in this conversation. I just want to say, like, museums have a lot of red tape. They're probably the most risk-averse institutions that there are, that can ever exist. And I'm personally surprised that we have like 4 major institutions, like the Hermitage, Uffizi, the British Museum, who else? And then many working on, not having launched NFTs, but working on that actively. So I'm actually quite surprised, because museums are late adopters of technology. So why I think they have already started embracing NFTs despite the risks and the unknowns and the criticism. Because if you hear the criticism, it's immense from the museum community. It's because the pandemic put them in such a terrible position financially. They had like 70% decrease in, so you would see layoffs even in like the Science Museum Group, the V&A laying off 10% of their staff, the Tate Museums, Tate Modern, Tate Liverpool, Tate Britain, laying off again 10% of their staff. So you would, even if the major ones are struggling, imagine what was happening elsewhere. So anyway, I think things look rather encouraging. And I'm actually happy that museums did brave, kind of like march on and said, let's try. For example, the British Museum has received tons of criticism for various reasons, but they didn't hold back. They went now and announced the Turner NFT after the Hokusai NFTs. So, and I actually admire that. That takes courage, because knowing how museums think, it did take some courage.
I totally agree. I think, and I also think that NFTs will have so much more potential to be explored, even beyond the what you said, that the pandemic affected the revenues of these museums. But for sure, NFTs will probably have a much longer effect that goes beyond the problems related to the pandemic. Now I would like to wrap up the discussion because we are running out of time. But first I would like to give George the opportunity to give his final thoughts, since he has been here since the very beginning. George, would you like to add anything to the discussion?
Yeah, maybe for museums, my advice is to also get in touch with some of the existing platforms. They might be helpful, and they might help to develop some strategy for them without developing their own platform, which might need more resources, money, and also know-how. So this is something that I would advise for museums.
All right. So yeah, I think that's a very good moment to wrap up the discussion. I really appreciated everyone here. Thank to our audience to be presented and for the interesting questions. Thanks to our panelists for the super interesting discussion. And please feel free, if you want to continue the discussion further, you can move to the next room. If you actually touch the arrow on the bottom left, you can see that there are other rooms. There is one on the bottom. I believe it's let me see. There should be a room where people can connect with each other, and I think that you can go there and discuss further any topics that you are interested in. So thanks a lot again for the discussion, and hopefully see you soon on this platform.